The first punch took Tommy down faster than any of us expected. One moment, my 73-year-old buddy was standing his ground. The next, he was sprawled across the sticky bar floor, blood pooling from his split lip. "That's how we treat dinosaurs who don't know when to shut up," laughed the biker with knuckle tattoos. "Hate on the right hand, ride on the left. Big bastard." Leather vest straining against a beer gut. Confederate flag patch on his sleeve. Tommy spat blood, his arthritic hands, struggling to find purchase on the floor. Korean war vet, 2 purple hearts reduced to crawling at the boots of a bar thug. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling with a mix of rage and Parkinson's. The screen blurred through my cataracts, but I didn't need to see clearly to send the text I drafted hours ago when the bikers first started causing trouble. SOS, VFW, barcode homecoming. The response came immediately. Cavalry inbound. 20 minutes. Hold position. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked across the table at Frank and Bill. Our silent consensus was clear. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a bar fight. But we'd faced worse odds in Vietnam. We'd hold. "Son," I said to Knuckles, my voice steadier than my hands, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Veterans of foreign wars post-713 had been our sanctuary for decades. Every Thursday at 1900 hours sharp, 5 old soldiers gathered at the corner table to drink cheap beer and share expensive memories. Me, Tommy, Frank, Bill, and Pete. What remained of a once larger circle whittled down by time and illness. We weren't the only vets who used the place. Scattered around the bar were men and women from more recent conflicts: Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. But Thursday nights belonged to us, the last of the Vietnam generation in our town. Tonight had started like any other. Tommy complaining about his new heart medication. Frank showing off pictures of his newest great-grandchild. Bill nursing a single beer to make it last the evening. Fixed income didn't stretch to second rounds anymore. Pete hadn't shown. 3rd week in a row. Hospice care had a strict schedule, and visiting hours ended at 5 p.m. The bikers arrived around 8 p.m. Half a dozen men in leather cuts displaying Iron Reaper MC patches, not local, passing through looking for entertainment in a town with limited options. They'd been loud but tolerable until they noticed Tommy's Vietnam veteran cap. "Hey, Pops," Knuckles called across the room. "Your hat says Vietnam, you one of them. Baby killers are just a rem who scraped from the latrines." The bar went quiet. Tommy, who'd survived 2 tours and came home with shrapnel still embedded in his back, turned slowly in his seat. "Son, I'd suggest you enjoy your drink and leave the past where it belongs. Sounds like a ramp to me." Knuckles smirked to his buddies. Real warriors don't mind talking about their kills. I put a restraining hand on Tommy's arm. His blood pressure was already a medical concern, and a confrontation wouldn't help. "Let it go," I murmured. "Not worth it." But Knuckles wasn't finished. He sauntered over, beer in hand, towering over our table. "You boys look like you're past your expiration date. Why don't you clear out? Let real men use this table." Frank, the diplomat of our group, tried next. "Plenty of tables available, friend. We'll be done soon enough." "I'm not your friend, old man." Knuckles growled, then deliberately poured beer over Frank's photographs. "Oops. Guess your little brat's pictures got wet." That's when Tommy stood up. Of elderly defiance facing down 6 FT of tattooed aggression. "You need to leave," Tommy said quietly. Now, the punch came without warning. Knuckles moved fast for a big man, his fist connecting with Tommy's jaw, sending his glasses flying. And that's how we found ourselves in a standoff, Tommy bleeding. On the floor, 5 other bikers moving to surround our table, and the rest of the bar patrons suddenly finding reasons to look away. The young bartender was already reaching for the phone. But who would he call? Local police were 20 minutes out from anywhere, and we didn't have 20 minutes. What we did have was reinforcements of our own. "You have no idea what's coming," Bill said calmly, speaking for the first time that evening. The quietest of our group, he'd served as a sniper. 3 tours. His confirmed kills remained a number he'd never shared, even with us. Knuckles laughed. "What's coming? Heart attacks, ambulances, bedtime." I helped Tommy to his seat, pressing a napkin to his bleeding lip. Frank, how's your grandson doing at Fort Benning? Frank dabbed at his soaked photographs, voice conversational. Finished Ranger School last month, deployed to the base 20 mi north along with about 50 of his closest friends. That right? I turned to Bill. And your granddaughter? She's still flying those Apache helicopters? Bill smiled thinly. Made captain last year. Very protective of her grandpa. The bikers exchanged glances, sensing something beneath the casual conversation. What the are you old-timers talking about? Knuckles demanded. Just catching up, I said, checking my watch. Funny thing about veterans, we're never really alone. You threatening me? Knuckles leaned in, breath stinking of whiskey and bad decisions. Not at all, I replied, just suggesting you might want to finish your drinks and move along before the bar's front door crashed open with military precision. 5 soldiers in Army combat uniforms entered, not rushing but with purpose. Young, fit, radiating controlled tension. Their eyes scanned the room with professional efficiency before locking onto our table. Grandpa, the tallest one, called out, "You okay?" Frank waved. Over here, Jake, having a bit of a situation. Jake strode across the bar accompanied by 2 male and 2 female soldiers. No weapons visible, but they moved with the absolute confidence of trained combatants. This him? Jake asked, stopping in front of Knuckles. At 6'3", Ranger qualified and combat tested. Jake made the biker look small despite their similar builds. This gentleman, Frank said mildly, thought it appropriate to assault Tommy and destroy family photographs. Jake's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. That, right, Knuckles, to his credit, didn't back down immediately. Bar dispute not your business, soldier boy. See, that's where you're wrong, Jake replied. Tommy served with my grandfather in the Myeong Delta, saved his life twice. He nodded toward me. Jack there was my grandmother's brother's best friend. Bill taught me to shoot when I was 12. His gaze hardened. So this is very much my business. The bar door opened again. More uniforms. 10, then 15, then 20 men and women, different patches and insignia, filing in quietly. What the hell is this? One of the other bikers demanded. A woman in captain's bars stepped forward, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Posture perfect. I'm Captain Wilson, Bill's granddaughter. Got a text. There was trouble. Just a few. Calls, I explained. Word travels fast among military families. The bar had transformed in minutes, where there had been indifferent civilians looking away. From conflict now stood a wall of uniforms. Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, young faces with old eyes, veterans from recent wars standing in quiet solidarity with veterans from older ones. Nobody called the cops, Knuckles said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Didn't need to, Tommy replied, still dabbing blood from his lip. We called family. Captain Wilson approached our table, kneeling beside Bill. You okay, Grandpa? Bill patted her hand. Fine, Lizzie. Just some excitement to break up the evening. She turned to assess Tommy's injury with professional detachment. Need medical attention, sir? It's Tommy. And no. Had worse shaving. Meanwhile, Jake and 2 other soldiers had positioned themselves between the bikers and our table. Not threatening, not advancing, just standing firm, creating a buffer zone of disciplined muscle and combat experience. Knuckles looked around, realizing how quickly the situation had changed. His crew of 6 now faced at least 30 military personnel, with the air, more arriving by the minute, as texts and calls spread through the nearby base. We don't want trouble with the military, he muttered, bravado deflating. Should have thought about that before assaulting decorated veterans, Jake replied. Tommy there has 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. Frank was at Kaysen for the entire siege. Bill served 3 tours as a sniper. Jack was a medic who saved more lives than you've probably met in your lifetime. How was I supposed to know? You weren't. Captain Wilson interrupted. That's the point. You saw old men and assumed they were easy targets. Never occurred to you they might be more than their age suggests. The biker with Prospect on his cut youngest, of the group barely out of his 20s, tugged at Knuckles' arm. Man, let's just go. This ain't worth it. Knuckles shrugged him off. Alcohol and pride still overriding good sense. We ain't done nothing illegal. Fell down, that's all. A new voice entered the conversation. The VFW post commander, a retired Marine colonel who'd been watching from the bar's office. Actually, I have clear video of you assaulting a patron, he said, holding up his phone. Normally, I just call the police, but since family is handling it, he looked at Captain Wilson. How would you like to proceed, Captain? She considered for a moment. I think education might be more valuable than prosecution. The colonel nodded, then addressed the bikers. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to these gentlemen. You're going to pay for any medical attention Tommy needs. You're going to replace the damaged photographs. And you're going to spend tomorrow at the VA hospital volunteering with wounded warriors. Or, he gestured to his phone. I send this to the county sheriff and you spend tomorrow in jail. Knuckles looked ready to argue until Jake took a half step forward, his ranger tab visible on his shoulder. Choose carefully, Jake suggested quietly. The fight visibly drained from Knuckles. Fine. Sorry about your lip, old-timer, in the pictures. Tommy nodded, accepting the apology with more grace than I would have managed. Good start, the colonel said. Now about tomorrow's volunteer session. After the bikers had been escorted out with clear instructions for their community service, the atmosphere in the bar transformed. What had begun as our quiet weekly gathering became an impromptu reunion across generations of warriors. Jake pulled up a chair next to Frank, examining the damaged photographs. I can get these reprinted, Grandpa. Digital backups, remember? Frank smiled. Always prepared, just like I taught you. Across the table, Captain Wilson Lizzie was checking Bill's blood pressure. Once a medic before becoming a pilot, she never visited, without making sure his health was on track. Over 82, she announced. Not bad for all the excitement. Bill patted her hand affectionately. Takes more than bar thugs to rattle me. The other service members had distributed themselves around the VFW, buying drinks, sharing stories, bridging the gaps between wars and generations. A young Marine was listening intently as Tommy described Quezon. 3 Army lieutenants sat captivated by Bill's understated account of sniper operations. I found myself beside a staff sergeant with 3 deployment patches comparing field medical techniques across decades. Tourniquets are back in, he explained. Full circle from your day. Some lessons get relearned the hard way. I agreed. The colonel pulled up a chair at our table. Jack, been meaning to ask, you coming to the school's program next month? Need Vietnam vets to talk to the high school kids, still trying to recruit the next generation, I teased. Still trying to help them understand sacrifice and service, he corrected. These kids think history started with 9/11. They need to hear from your generation while they still can. His words hung in the air. The unspoken reality of our dwindling numbers. Tommy broke the momentary silence. I'll do it. About time I shared some stories. Me too, Frank added. Bill simply nodded his agreement. I looked around at the unlikely gathering. Gray-haired veterans from conflicts long faded from public memory, sitting alongside young warriors still actively serving. The continuity struck me powerfully, how the thread of service connected us across decades and battlefields. Count me in, I told the colonel. Might as well make ourselves useful while we're still vertical. Jake laughed. Grandpa says you'll outlive us all out of pure stubbornness. Your grandpa knows me too well. The night grew late. Younger service members gradually departed, returning to base or homes, each stopping to shake hands or exchange words with us before leaving. The atmosphere of crisis had evolved into something like a family reunion. Tommy, lip swollen but spirit intact, raised his beer. 2 absent friends. Pete sends his regards. I told the group hospice says he's comfortable. Might try to arrange a visit if he's up to it next week. Frank nodded solemnly. We should go, all of us. The weight of Pete's situation settled around the table. Our circle growing smaller, the inevitable march of time that no amount of battlefield courage could halt. Captain Wilson, Lizzie, returned from seeing off the last of her soldiers. She stood behind Bill's chair, hands resting protectively on her grandfather's shoulders. Need a ride home, Grandpa? Bill shook his head. Jake's taking all of us. Monthly tradition. He drives us here. Make sure we get home safe. She bent to kiss his cheek. Good. I'll stop by tomorrow with those medications we talked about. Then to all of us, gentlemen, it's been an honor. Try to stay out of bar fights for at least a week, please. After she left, we sat in comfortable silence, finishing our drinks. Quite a cavalry response, Tommy mused, touching his swollen lip. Think we overreacted? Proportional response, Bill countered. They had 6. We had 30. Still good tactics, Frank added. Superior numbers, strategic positioning, clear chain of command. I thought about how quickly our text messages had mobilized what amounted to a small military operation. Young service members, dropping whatever they were doing to rush to the aid of old veterans they might not even know personally. It's more than just family, I said. It's the bond. Jake returned from walking Lizzie to her car. Ready to head out, old-timers? Past your bedtime. Tommy stood wincing slightly. Watch it, youngster. We can still take you. After what I saw tonight, I believe it. Jake laughed. Then, more seriously, those bikers are lucky you called us instead of handling it yourselves. Bill snorted. We would have won. At your age? Jake raised an eyebrow. Age just means we have less to lose, Bill replied, his sniper's eyes momentarily cold. And more experience hiding bodies. Jake's laugh faltered slightly, unsure if his grandfather's friend was joking. Frank gathered his damp photographs. Don't tease the boy, Bill. As we made our way to the door, the bartender, a veteran himself from the Gulf War era, called out, Same time next week, gentlemen. Wouldn't miss it, I confirmed. Outside, the night air carried a hint of approaching autumn. Jake helped Tommy navigate the steps while Frank and Bill moved with the careful precision of men whose bodies had betrayed their still sharp minds. You know, Jake said as he opened the van door, those bikers will be at the VA hospital tomorrow. Captains arranged for them to spend time with recent amputees and TBI patients. Educational experience. Fitting, Tommy nodded, though I almost feel sorry for them. The bikers? Jake asked. No. Tommy grinned despite his split lip. The wounded warriors who have to put up with those idiots. We laughed as Jake helped us into the van, old soldiers being cared for by the generation we'd once protected. The cycle of service and respect continuing despite a civilian world that often failed to understand either. Next Thursday would find us at the same table, drinking the same cheap beer, sharing the same precious memories. But something had shifted tonight. A reminder that though our bodies had weakened, the brotherhood remained strong. We had fought our wars decades ago in jungles and rice paddies far from home. But tonight's small battle on familiar ground had reaffirmed what we'd always known. Old warriors never truly retire, and they never fight alone.